This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Chav Zayin, and we hold on to pick it up in the bottom of Chavav and Beis. We are 2 lines from the bottom as we quote the din in the Mishnah. Halokeach peiros mechaverei. Someone who purchases produce peiros mechaverei from his friend, etc. Says the Gemara. Let's begin by qualifying this din in the Mishnah. Amar Reish Lakish teaches Reish Lakish Vishem Rav Yanai Lo Yishanu El. This din that we said that the one who finds the money amongst items that he purchased is allowed to keep it is Ella. That din is only true. But min hatagar is one who purchases from a tagar, from a merchant. Now, what does that mean? So Rashi explains what that means is that he himself got the original items from multiple vendors, a store that sources his items, Minanoshim Harbe, says Rashi. And therefore, even he, and the finder, the purchaser, is allowed to keep the item. But if someone purchases directly from a balabayis, chayiv lahachsir, then he has to announce it, because the balabayis says it's his stuff. When he realizes it's missing, he's not going to be miyayish. Therefore, you have to return it. Similarly, he says the Gemara of Chaytana Tana Kamed Rav Nachman on the third line of Chav Zayin and Aleph. Lo yishanu aloker min hatagar, aloker balabayis chayiv lahachsir. Amrle Rav Nachman v'chi balabayis ma'atzmai. Dashan. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Does the balabais himself thresh the produce? Rashi speaks out. He has many workers working for him. So similarly, if an item is found, we don't know exactly to whom it should be returned. So why do you have to return it to the balabais? The chayra should have been yush. Amrlei. So the one who brought down the brayso, the Tanit Tameid Rav Nachman, responded, Ismei, should I delete the brayso? Asir brayso zumikir sasi. Amar lei, so Rav Nachman said, no, you don't have to delete the brayso. Titargim masnita. But rather we could explain the brayso as a case, that he threshed, he got this produce through his own workers, which even if there was anything lost, it all goes to the adain, it all goes to the Baal Bayis. And therefore, when one purchases the tefillah from that person, something is found, what would the din be? It'd have to be returned, chayav lahachzer, because there would be no yish in such a case. We continue with the Mishnah. Af hasimla, says the Mishnah, that when the pasuk says simla, haisa bechlal kolela, it's really included in all of these. So therefore, what's the question? The Mishnah begins with a question. V'lama yatzasa. So why did the pasuk speak out for it to look at the v'chitas l'chamayra v'chitas l'simla soy v'chitas l'chol avidas alchicha? So why did the pasuk single out the simla? Lahakashela to equate to Elohim l'chab ma simla miyuchadesh shish v'simanim v'yish lo toivim. What is an article of clothing? Article of clothing is that it has simanim, as well as it has people that are claiming it. As long as there is simanim, as well as there are taivim, Rashi speaks out, taivim, people coming to claim the item as theirs. Something without taivim is something that we know that the owner is miyayish, so no one's coming to claim the item. So that teaches us the basic idea that the simla is the quintessential item that has defining characteristics, has people coming to collect it, so you have to announce it. Says the Gemara, my bechlal kolelu, what did the Mishnah mean? It's included in all these. Amrava Bechlal. It's included in, as we read the pasuk Lavidas Achicha. Amar Rava teaches Rava Lamali Dichsev Rachmana Shar Chamar Sevis Simla. Why did the pasuk have to speak out all these different items? And the truth is, it's kedai for a moment just to zero in on the pasuk that teaches us. We'll zoom it in. It's on the side of your Gemara's. And this really comes on the heels of the previous pasuk that says, don't turn a blind eye, but rather return the shar, the seh, the chamar, and the simla. So ask the Gemara now, why are all these psukim necessary? Seems to be a bit verbose that the psukim have to list so many different items that are found, so many different items that one is returning. Says the Gemara, so why do we have to listen to all these items? Shrichi, indeed, they're all necessary. Why? Because if the Torah would have only ever written Simla, I would have thought immediately Beidim de Gufa, the Simanim de Gufa, about the item itself of a chamar, beidim to oikev, simanim to oikev. When it comes to chamar, there's no identifying characteristics on the chamar itself, but rather the identifying characteristics on the chamar is on the saddle. And I would think maybe you don't have to return it. Because Rachman chamar teaches the chamar, Davidu chamar, b'simane oikev, you would have to return. Shar v'sed because Rachman alamli. Why does the pasuk read an ox and a sheep? Shar teaches that Davidu ligizas. Zinavai Ligizaisaf. That what does it teach us? Teach us that even a shar that has the sharings of the tail, even a sheep that has its sharings, you have to return it. Meaning, maybe the value of it is low and you wouldn't have to return it. No, even such an item. But a shar that we call shkein selling Gizaisaf. The avi is kasha. Once we know shar, why do we need to know seh? Once you know shar for the mere tail, you have to return it, of course, the seh. Hello, Marava, different shot. Chamar debar the Rav Yehuda says, Rava, the word chamar is teaching us something that is damaged. This brings us back to the world of Baba Kama. Something that is damaged in a bar, according to the opinion of Rav Yehuda, v'sed aveda l'divrei akol, and says, teaching us the din of aveda. So two different dinim being taught over here. Says the Gemara, we said David the very called Kasha. No. Says the Gemara, this was a Kasha, I apologize. Ela Marava, Chamar debar Rav Yehuda said David l'divrei akol Kasha. Says Rav Yehuda, both of these parts of the pasuk are shver. Ve'ima, so says Gemara, why liglalim udasa? Maybe it's coming to teach us the din about glalim, that the dung of the animal has to be returned. Meaning, maybe when the pasuk mentioned Sam, it's come to teach us that even the glalim of the animal have to be returned. Says the Gemara, it's not true. Glalim mafkirim mafkir lehu. The owner is mafkir the glalim, and therefore one does not need to return it. Says the Gemara, v'delma l'simanin hu dasa. But maybe the pasuk says an extra time to teach us the din of simanim, meaning dibayilon. As the Gemara that we find a very fundamental shaila. Simanim daraisa derabanan. We've been discussing this entire parak, this concept that you return an item if the owner gives a siman. Says the Gemara, we have a fundamental shaila. Is this din of a siman? Is this a din daraisa or is this a din derabanan? So perhaps suggests the Gemara, because Rachmana said, Dafilu b'simanim mahadrinan and simanim deraisa. And maybe this teaches us that the din of simanim is a din deraisa. Says the Gemara, no. Meditani lutana l'simanim kabi simla. Since the time of the Mishnah to the din of simanim with regard to the word simla to katani, as we find as our Mishnah taught us that a simla is an item that there are Taivim and there are Simanu Chayiv Lachris. Al Kol Shish Simanim Yesh Taivim Chayiv Lachris. Shema Mina Deselav Simanu Deasa. So clearly, we don't need the apostle to mention Sef for such a din, as we learned it out from Simla. Therefore, we do not necessarily have a raya that it's a din daraisa or not. We continue with the two dots, about 10 lines to the bottom. Tanarabanon. Asher Toiva teaches the basik, an item that is lost prat. That comes to exclude aveda she'ein bo yishaveh pruta. That comes to exclude aveda that is not worth a shaveh pruta, that it would not have to be returned, as Asher Taivad is referring to something that's considered lost. Rav Yehuda Omer umatzasa pralavida shein b'shaveh pruta. We don't have the pasuk of umatzasa. My beinayu, two different shatim teaching us the same din. Tanakam and Rav Yehuda says the Gemara, what's the chiluk between these two dinim? Am Rabaya mashmois darshim ika beinayu. Says the Gemara, in reality, there's really not much difference. Mashmais, how the pasuk connotes this din, that is the difference. Ask the Gemara, 6 lines from the white lines, which really was the depth of the kasha of Benayu. But says the Gemara, the driving force of the drasha was the mashmais. But at the end of the day, what does each one do with the other pasuk? Explains the Gemara, Homi Baila Lech Rav Noi. When he is for the dinner of Rav Noi, Damar Rav Noi, Matzasa. What does that teach us? Dasai Liyodei Mashma. So that actually come to your hand. If it doesn't come to your hand, then there's no problem not returning the item. As we take a moment, Rashi says, Shetei Kruya Metziah. When's it called a Metziah? Dasal Liyodei Mashma, Rashi 10 lines to the bottom, Vafilu Hachi. Achicha v'lo yakom v'lametcha shavidas kenani mutares v'lotem ki amit avidas. That's really 1 second. The Gemara is about to get there. V'leman din avklei mivatzasa hayisha tovin mayavalei. Mivaylei lech Rav Yechon. Dam Rav Yechon v'shem Rashbi. Says Rav Yechon, the name of the Heliger Rashbi on the first white line. Minayin avei dashish shimuteres. We've had this already. How do we know that Naveda, that the river wash you, that keep it, Shemar Kin Taschav is the Chashdav Amenu. Umatzasa. Mishavude Menu Umatzia. So that's lost, and you find it's a koladam yatzazu, but an item that was washed away from the river, Shavude Men, it's lost from you, Ve'ina Mitzia, it's a koladam, would not have to be returned. Ve'edach, Hadar Av Naimin Alai, Nafkalei, Mivi Matzasa. Ve'edach, Hadar Av Yechon Min Alai, Nafkalei, Mimenu. So that's what everyone does with other drasha. Rava Amar comes along Rava, and Rava says, no, there's another din that this is learned out from. Truth is, let's go back to that Rashi. Rashi is adding on an interesting detail. I apologize. I thought the Gemara was going to elaborate. Let's go back to Rashi for a second. 10 lines from the bottom. Rashi says, and therefore the din of Achichav Layakom teaches us Avedas Kenani Mutaris. Don't teach me Kiamid Aveda Kenani Militrayach Achareo. Teaching us a negative. Maybe I would think that there's a special din that you don't have to return the Aveda of a guy. But maybe that's only Militrayach Achareo to go and get it. However, once it comes to your hand, maybe you would think that as a din of a Metziah, you have it in your hand, and therefore you have to return it, regardless if it's a Yid or a Goy. And therefore, a Matzasa teaches us that no, it is the din of a Metziah when it comes to your hand, with all its dinim, including that it's only a din that you have to return a Yid, and not a Goy's. Rava Amar says, Rava, a second shot in the chilek between the Tanakama and Rav Yehuda. Says Rava, Pruta Shahosla Ika Beinayo, Pruta that went down in value. Mandamar Shataivad Ika. Why? Because at the time that it was lost, Ika, you're going to have to return it. At the time the loss, it was worth more than a Shava Pruta. So says the Gemara, whether the time that the pasuk is talking about is the losing or the finding will determine whether you have to return something in a scenario that it was worth a certain value, and then it went down at a later date. Says the Gemara, so what do you mean, Veleka? It says the Gemara, can't be that what you're saying. Because even according to Manda Amr that says it's lost, but Lamaisa, you also have to find it. So how can you tell me that because when it was lost, it was worth a Shavapruta? Even though when I found it, it wasn't as a din of a I have to return it? How can that be? So Allah says, okay, different case, Pruta Shokra, you can be now you. The opposite. A Pruta that goes up in value. Man, Damar Masal Seikuk, so Lamaisa is worth a Shavapruta. Man, Damar Shatayvileka. Says the Gemara, the same kasha in the reverse for lines to the bottom. And of course, it is a little bit difficult to have a mina that. The Gemara is just speaking at the flip side. Why did the Gemara think that it would have a different result? But either way, Ella says the Gemara, third attempt. Pruta shahokra v'hozla v'chazer v'hokra. Pruta went up and down, up in value, down in value, and then went back up in value again. That is the difference. Manda Amar, Asher Toivarika, Manda Amar Umatsasa, Dinan de Isbe Shir Metziah, Mishas Aveda, V'Adshas Metziah. So that's the chalik at the end of the day, according to Rav. It's not just, it's not just the Shas Metziah, the time of finding it, and Shas Aveda, the time of losing it. Says Rava, the Manda Amar holds Umatsasa. Rav Yehuda holds it has to be in Aveda the entire time. Meaning it has to be worth a Shava Pruta from beginning until end, from the moment it was lost to the moment it was found. And if there was a moment in time that went down in value, then it loses its status of an Aveda. Ibayi Lahu on the final line of Chavzayin Amnalf, the Gemara brings back a Shaila we mentioned a few moments ago. Lemaisa, Siman of Raisa, Idarabanan. We try to bring one raya that's the Raisa, but we fell off that raya. Says the Gemara first, before we bring rayas, whether it's the Raisa, whether it's the Rabbanan, my beinayu. What's the difference? Asks the Gemara. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Chavzayin Mebeis, the Nafkamina is going to be not about the Metziah, but Laguri get Isha Bisimanim. To return a get Isha Bisimanim. To return and get Isha Bisimanim. That is the nafkamina, whether you hold this deraisa or not. Amrit deraisa. If you're going to tell me to din deraisa, then even by a get, Madrinan v'amid rabbanon, give a rabbanon tekanta. When the rabbanon give a tekana is only b'mamayna to return a mitziyah. I'll be surah levi rabbanon tekanta. So fundamental shayla is the din of simanim, a din deraisa or a din derabbanon. Tashemach of Zayim and Beis, 4 lines down. Let's bring a raya from a Mishnah. Said the Mishnah, Ava Simla Isa Bechlal Kolelu, V'lama Yatzal. Why was it singled out? Lahakish Eila to equate it, V'layim Lachan to teach you. Ma Simla Miyuchadesh Sheish Lo Simanim V'yish Lo Toivim Chayev Lahachos. Am Kodam Sheish B'Simin Simanim V'yish Lo Toivim Chayev Lahachos. So says the Gemara. So what do we see from here from the Mishnah? We see that we're learning from a pasuk. We're learning from Simla that is a din of Simanim. So clearly it's a din daraisa. Says we're now Tani Toivim Yitzichalei Simanim K'dei Nazba. We're not really learning out the din of Simanim from the pasuk. We're really learning out the din that the owner was not miyayish. K'dei Nazba derech agav. We also throw in about Simanim. Says the Gemara, okay, 10 lines down. The first one line is Tashema. Let's try again. Chamar b'simane ukaf. We said he returned a chamar with the simanim on the saddle. So l'chayr from there again. What do we see? We learn out from the pasuk of chamar. So we see it's a deraisa. Answers Gemara, no. Ema be'edei ukaf. No, it means with the edim, which of course has nothing to do with simanim. Tashema, we try again. Until your friend inquires of it. What does that mean? Why, you can return it before he asks for it? Ella, we learn out from the pasuk. Adroi shachicha darsheyu imramayu oyeinoi ramai. But how do you darshan if he's a ramai? My love, says the Gemara b'simanim. Lo, it is with edim, so we still have no rai. Tashema. So now flips the Gemara. Let's bring a rai the other way that it's not a deraisa. Ein me'idin ella al parts of abanim imachaitem. With regard to a corpse, you can only testify about the image of the face with the nose. Aval b'sheish simanim begufay ubekelev. Even if you have simanim on the body or on the clothing. So what do we see from the fact you have to only be able to testify in the face of the person himself clearly? The simanim on the kelim is not enough. So shmami no simanim lav deraisa. Answers Gemara, no. Amri gufay. What does it mean siman on the body? The arach legotzi, tall and long. Kelev the chashina l'sheila. But it's nothing to do with the fundamental shaila of simanim deraisa or not. Says the Gemara, chashina l'sheila chamar b'simanim uke v'echam adrinan. So why don't we say the same thing by a chamar? We should be nervous that they borrow the saddle. Why would we return it to that owner? Amri ukaf lo yishule inchi. People do not borrow saddles. The reason is because it could hurt the donkey's back. Apologize. Could hurt the donkey's back if it doesn't fit perfectly. So people don't borrow an ukaf. Or what does it mean by the kelim of the clothing? It just means the color, and therefore it's not necessarily a raya, whether it's a proper simin or not. So says the Gemara, Ella, Haditanya. That which we learned in our Brisa asks the Gemara, 6 lines from the white lines, Ella Haditanya, Matsu, Kasher, Bekesai Barniki, Utabas, Shamatsu, Ben Kilov. Someone finds a get that's tied up in a wallet, in a kiss, with a ring. Shamatsu Bekeli finds the get between his kelim, Afilus Man Meruba. Kosher, the get is kosher. But ask the Gemara 1 second. If you find it tied to a wallet, why is it a kosher get? Am I kosher? Why don't we worry that it's borrowed? Why don't we worry that the kiss was borrowed, and they had the get attached to it, so why are we necessarily allowed to use it when it's found as man meruba? These aren't things people usually lend out. A wallet or an arniki. Why? Because people are superstitious that it's gonna give away their money, their good fortune to the other person. V'tabas mishum de Metziah. If you're worried he's going to counterfeit, he's going to steal your signet ring. So after going back and forth trying to prove siman deraisa or not, on the first white line the Gemara folds and the Gemara says lema kitanoi lemaisa. Let's say that whether simanim are deraisa or not, let's suggest it's a machlokes tanoi. So we quote a brayse that says ein meidin ala shuma. Whether we're allowed to testify about a shuma, which is a form of a mole on the face, on the body, on a specific limb, says Rashi, would that be allowed to allow one's wife to remarry, to identify this was her husband who was nifter? My love, says Gemara, what's the machlekes whether you can testify on a shuma or not? Suggest the Gemara in the second white line, Tanikama Savar Simanim Derabana, and therefore you can't. Let's been Mavai Savar Simanim Deraisa. If you can testify about the Shuma. Oh my Rava, no, that's not the Machlekes. The Kuliyalma Simanim Deraisa. V'achav Shuma Metziah beben Gilai Kamifliki. A Shuma is found beben Gilai, which is someone that's born in the same mazel, etc. So Mars of a Shuma Metziah beben Gilai, and therefore it's not necessarily a good raya, because maybe it's someone else that was just born in the exact same mazel as you. Therefore, there's no raya. Mars of a Shuma in a Metziah beben Gilai, they might look the same, act the same, but not going to necessarily have the same warts on the body. Ibay Sema, second shot to Kuliyama Shuma in a Metziah beben Gilai. It's a sim that's going to change. Mar somer simon amasu lishtanois lachamisa mar somer simon enu lishtanois lachamisa. Therefore, you can't bring a raya from the shuma v'ibay sema. A third shot says the Gemara. V'ibay sema. A third shot says the Gemara. We're about 15 lines to the bottom of the Amid. First one line is Misa. Says the Gemara, Iba Yisema, the Kuliyama Shumaina Sulishanas Achamisa. And you see man in the Rabban. Stam, they're arguing whether a shuma is a good simin. Come if limarsa shuma simin muvaku, ma'asav shuma lav simin muvaku. So says the Gemara 3 different ways of learning the brayso. All my Rav, so says Rav. Im Tim Salam, if you're going to tell me Siman and Lav, Siman him. So Stam says Rava, how can you ever return Avid with Siman him? What's the kasha? Because if Midaraisa, with no reason to believe a Siman, so why is that enough of a reason to give it back to this person? Maybe it's not his. Says the Gemara, and of course from here we see the depth of what pshat in the siman is. Says the Gemara, Dinicha leila moitza avida, then had there be simanim. The one that finds an item is happy to return simanim. Keicha avida leili didei nami najida leili simanim. So says the Gemara, it could very well be a derabbanan did that when I find something really midaraisa, it's true. I could keep it because simanim are not a good siman. Not identifying deraisa, but I myself am happy to return it. So if I then go lose something, I'll also be able to get it back. Amar le Rav Savra le Rava. What do you mean? What does that mean? He's doing a taiva for himself. So that's not his. What about anyone else in the world? This aveda might be theirs. Elenichle lebala veda. Maybe Simon lemishkle made the other that idim is less lebe umeimar amar kol yam leoda Simon muvak tida. V'hani avin Simon muvak tida v'shaklina la. Says the Gemara, no, the bala veda is happy about it, so that he himself can get it back, etc. Elahadetzinan. Rather, choose. We're going to stop over here, as this is going to go well into the next Amud, as we're going to finish up discussing how exactly Simanim allow one to return an item.